You're about to experience a message from here at South Lake Church where we
engage, grow, and share.
So make sure to subscribe below and keep watching together as we engage, grow, share Jesus in our community relationships. Well, good morning, everybody. I am Pastor Rob Bailey here at South Lake Church, and we're continuing our sermon series on the heart of God. And today it's on the 6th Commandment, and a reminder of the need for intimacy. So why are we talking about the 6 Commandments? Why even talk about the heart of God? Well, Jesus, on the night which he's betrayed, tells his disciples, gives them one commandment. I leave you with one commandment, one new one. To love as I have loved you. For they will know you are my disciples for your love of one another. And as Christians, we hear this awesome news, right? Just love and we're good. What does that look like? Well, in the ministry of Jesus, we hear it's two things, right? It's to love God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself.
Hey, on the news, they say people say wear guns on your body. You say people you have your license, the cop.
You don't even need to carry.
You don't carry your license. You have your
Well, you better love your neighbor with those guns, or else they're going to arrest you.
Be careful.
That's right.
Yeah, be safe.
Got to be safe, especially here in Texas. And with that, we love one another. But the problem is, and actually there's some, Lalo showed with us is, there's different ways to love people, right? And to feel like we did love that person. So how do we do that? So if we go back to the Old Testament, we see how God shares, what does it mean to share love of a God who rescues his people? And how easily his people and we mess up those commands. Which brings us back why we're all here together and the need to know Jesus. So what happens is we get these commandments. 3 of them focus on relationship with God. The other 7, relationship with one another. But it's funny how both of them have an effect on ourselves, those around us, but especially our Father in heaven. And as we've been going through this last couple weeks, we come to the fun one, the 6th commandment. You shall not, or of course in our reading, you must not commit adultery. Now we hear those words, got to ask the question, what is adultery? Well, an easy answer to say that, it's having sex outside of a marriage. With anybody. But all the adults and all the married adults in this room know when we talk and have a conversation about sex, is it just the physical action of being with another person? No, it's not just the physical. There's emotions. There's thoughts, intellectual. There's even a spiritual aspect. So another word we typically use when we talk about this kind of love of another person to help broaden and include all those different understandings of that relationship is the word intimacy, which goes beyond just one of those factors. And we hear the command that says, do not misuse our intimacy outside your marriage. Do not commit adultery. And we're going to work through that today. What does that mean? Why is that so important? Why do they even bring that up? But I need to be honest with you and up front. As a single man, not married, I am an expert on marriage and all tensions. And the reason why is I don't know any better yet. But the truth of the matter truly is, I am an expert of messing up intimacy, misusing it, hurting others. I don't come up here to share with you because I have an expert understanding of how to live this life out, because I've done it. I'm sharing this because I too have messed this up and hurt people. And my guess is, as I shared a couple weeks ago, each week there might be a gut punch to you, depending on which week. This might be a week you might feel a gut punch to yourself. Because when we work through intimacy, this important relationship with others, it's messy, it's difficult, and it can be a big struggle. So let's talk about, why do we even bring this up? Where does this all come from? So it's the 10 Commandments. We've got the Moses guy, right? For those old enough, Charlton Heston, leading the people out of Egypt. They're at Mount Sinai. Hundreds of thousands of people gathered in the desert in a mountain terrain. There's this smoke, there's all kinds of stuff coming down, and Moses shares God's covenant, his promise with his people. That if you love your people, you're with your people, you follow these rules, you will be in the promised land. But one of those commandments is, you shall not commit adultery. Let's think about the circumstances here. We're talking over 600,000 men, over probably close to 1 million people in total, all living close and next to each other. Why do you think one of the rules would be, do not commit adultery? When somebody's tent is right next to your tent and their tent is next to their neighbor's tent, it's easy for things to start to get messed around. Especially within a marriage. But I think there's more to this. I think the reason why we have do not commit adultery is God realized we need intimate relationships in our lives. With one another, within a husband and a wife, but who also? With him. And he knew this would be a struggle for people. How do I know that? Well, anybody know the story of the golden calf? While Moses is up with God, Juliet knows it. Awesome. When Moses is up with God, what happens? God's people start a party. They take all the jewelry off, right? And they make a big calf out of gold. They start worshiping it. Moses shows up. What have you done? And people get killed. The problem is, and if you watch the movie The 10 Commandments, when Moses has the 10 Commandments to address the people, is that when the party and the golden calf are happening? Think about that for a second. A lot of times you see this picture of Moses coming down with the tablets. He's about to share these rules. And here are the people partying and enjoying themselves. He gets so aggravated, he does what? He smashes them. Smash them. But what really happens in the Bible is God shares his commandments with Moses. He comes down to the people, and they worship together and say, Lord, we're going to live out these commandments. We're all doing this together. And after the celebration and worship, they go back up the mountain, Moses and the leaders, and they spend time with God. What does it mean to live this out? They're gone about 40 days, which is supposed to be the original amount of time they were supposed to be in the wilderness, is the same time they're up in the mountain, being with God, how they are supposed to lead and share this with the people. What happens for the people? Where's God? Where are our leaders? We want a relationship with them. We want to worship with them. Well, if God won't come to us, we'll go to God. Let's make our God. Let's worship our God. And the people came together. Working through this week, I truly believe that story of the golden calf, were people wanting a relationship with God, but since they didn't feel like he was with them, they wanted to force that relationship. And by worshiping this idol, which commandment did they break? The first commandment. So it's the first? Yes. Philip gets an extra treat when he gets home. I really believe part of that was they wanted intimacy with God, and they wanted to do it all together. And because they were far away and away from them, they wanted to bring God to themselves. I say that now because that's a good question. Is the commandment, you shall not commit adultery, still needed today? My answer is yes. And part of the... Oh, get married. Oh, good question. We'll talk about that. Yeah, so adultery today is needed even now to talk about why we need to deal with this. Because we have relationships. Now the question becomes, is this only for people who are married, husbands and wives? Well, if you look at our app, for those who have it, I have some extra readings for us today. Martin Luther, this was his opinion about the 6th commandment. You should fear and love God so that we lead a chaste and decent life in the word and deed, that a husband and wife each love and honor the other. And the belief here, when he says love and honor the other, even before you marry them, how are you living your life to honor them and loving them? Which means this deals for all of us. But as a married couple, we'll talk about God's people, you have a special relationship for those who are married with your spouse. One that is celebrated together. We call this what? A honeymoon, right? But after the honeymoon, do things get easier or harder? Harder. We got an expert over here. Yeah, they get harder. But what's special about your relationship is because of that physical part of the intimacy. The two of you get to spend time with each other in a way that no other couple should know you. The way you guys talk to each other, spend time with each other, to know your thoughts. And for those who've been married for a while, do you get to know each other on the emotional, intellectual side right off the bat? That's something that takes time, but it develops and it grows. And being that relationship also has a way to have work towards your faith of God with one another. Problem is, when things aren't working right, is it easy to go elsewhere? Yeah. The hard part is on your phones, laptops. We can find it, we can search it. You can make phone calls, you can text with dating apps. There's a whole bunch of ways to get the physical stuff that wasn't easily as accessible way back then. But nothing's changed in that aspect. It's just how easy to get it. But the harder part is when you don't have that emotional, the emotional aspect, you start talking with others. And you start connecting with others. And it's amazing how that connection can start to separate you from the relationship with your spouse. We call that now an emotional fear, but I bring that up because that emotional fear starts a downward spiral to separation. And the last part of this, how does that look like for your faith with God with that? What about us as married kids? Us as non-married and all the kids in the room? Do we need to love and take care and be there for others? Yep. How about as brothers and sisters? Do we need to be there for one another? Yes. Not so much there? So we got at least 2 brothers and sisters that are working through it. Other 2. That's why we got Dad there to keep things together. No. But it's difficult, right? But loving and being with others is part of this relationship. But the problem is, just like for married people, a person who isn't married, you can easily find other ways to enjoy different aspects of intimacy. Well, what's the danger? for a lot of people, they'd say, whatever I do in private doesn't affect others. My warning to you, and we're going to work through what Jesus says now, what we look at, what we see, changes our minds, our thought patterns, our hearts towards others and one another. It leads to a separation. You might not feel it yourself, but it's happening. And I can tell you the other people on the other end are being hurt, and you might not even realize it. This is why we're talking about this together. Here's what Jesus says. If you guys want to take a look, this is in Matthew chapter 5. You've heard the commandment say to you, you must not commit adultery. But I say that anyone who looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Oofta. Sorry, that's from up north. We just went from, if you physically commit an act, you're in trouble, to Jesus saying simply looking at somebody and having a thought. What did we talk about last week with murder? Our thoughts and emotions are just as dangerous as the actions. That theme is carrying out even here right now with Jesus. He's making a point that for all of you who, and he's going and calling out the Jewish leaders, who are religious, all of you that are making sure you're not caught sleeping with somebody outside your marriage, but are scoping out others, you're just as sinful as the ones committing it. The difference is you haven't been caught. But there's another piece to this which helps us better understand the last part of the reading. So we'll get to that. But Jesus says this really crazy, scary instructions here. I'll say it's crazy. So if your eye, even your good eye, causes you to lust, gouge it out and throw it away. It's better to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And he goes on with hands and everything. Does that sound encouraging to anybody? Should I get the South Lake Ryobi chainsaw out? We're all giggling and laughing, but think about that. How many different parts of our body have been used to sin against another person? It's kind of sad. It is sad. But the point being is, we've all sinned that way. I do not believe that Jesus is saying, please come to church, get something chopped off right now, so that you don't keep sinning with it. Because if that's the case, all of us would be hobbling out of here. But I think what Jesus is pointing out to the seriousness of how easily we are led to sin. But then the hard part of the reading. You probably picked up on this, it's at the end. A man can divorce his wife. You've heard in the law that say a man can divorce his wife by merely giving her a written notice of divorce. But I say that a man who divorces his wife, unless she is unfaithful, causes her to commit adultery. Anyone who marries a divorced woman also commits adultery. We've heard these words in church before, and the sad part is it puts a scarlet letter, or a feeling of a scarlet letter, of judgment on somebody who's divorced. Because Jesus says that person who's divorced has committed adultery. And if they remarry, they've committed adultery. What's going on here? And to help us understand, he says these words, you've heard the law say. Well, this comes from Deuteronomy chapter 24, verse 1. Moses, at the end of the journey of them going into the promised land, tells the people, if you are going to get a divorce, it is okay to divorce if she does something, the woman, that is unfaithful. You must give her a piece of paper and make it official. It's going to sound weird, but it's actually kind of cool. We're seeing the rights of women actually make a high priority right here. What God is saying through Moses, that when you marry other people and just get rid of your wife, She needs to have a legal piece of paper to show that, you know what? She is no longer connected from you. She can take another marriage. She is a free woman. That is actually what those verses are talking about. But what's happened over time, what they were doing was, and this is why he said about the eye, is that men were looking at the younger women saying, you know what? I'm good with this one. I'm now going to marry this one. Oh, I want to sleep with this one. But if he's married and he sleeps with her, what has he just committed? Adultery. But if I divorce her, give her the paper, now I can leave her, marry her, and guess what I've not committed? Adultery. I'm being serious. This is what's happening. This is why I believe Jesus uses the eye part and makes the point of when you look. Because this is what the religious people were doing to look good in front of God. Now they bring this up, and again, this is more for P's and Q's, because they were teaching two schools of thought. One said the divorce must be based on her having an affair, committing adultery. The other school of thought said if she did anything you didn't like not cooking your food correctly, you were allowed to divorce. And we're trying to see where Jesus was on this. But again, what's this discussion all about? Because the men wanted to sleep with somebody else. In order to do that without God being mad, you got a divorce, and then you married them. Jesus is calling out the hypocrisy and the misuse of intimacy within them. Do we struggle with that today? Yeah. Now, the religious angle is different, but overall, men and women search, want, desire all these things. We want intimacy. It's not a bad thing. But when we misuse it outside of a relationship of a husband and wife, it's dangerous and it hurts people. And as we shared with the story of the golden calf, that intimacy is something that we want with God too. But we break it all the time. Like the joke, right? If we were to chop off every piece of our body that causes us to sin, we'd be a chunk of just a torso. Or just bones. So what did God do with that? Well, last week we talked about he took on our hurt, in a sense, took on murder and death for us. I want to say is he took on our uncleanliness, took on all the pieces should be chopped off, and took that on the cross so that we could have an intimate relationship with God. That no matter what we struggle with, no matter what we hurt with, no matter what we're seeking with, because of Jesus, we can go to him. Which means those marriages that those who are lucky enough to be in one, those who've been a part of one, it's about experiencing a love between two people that the closest thing you can come to would be the love with God. This is what Paul shares about that. This is from Ephesians chapter 5. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, so that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by washing of water with the word, he might present to himself the church in all her glory, having no spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but she would be a holy and blameless. In a sense, we are the bride to Christ, and he gave himself to make us worthy to be his. That is a marriage. That is an intimate relationship. What we have here on earth within our own marriage, with our own things, is it broken? Yes. Are there struggles? Absolutely. But we have a Lord who said, you were good enough that I would make you my wife, my bride, that I would die for you. So with that good news, with hearing that we have a Lord who loves us so much that says, I want a relationship with you, how do we share it with others? For husbands and wives, have that intimate relationship. to love one another, which is difficult when we're angry, we're frustrated, when people are late, things aren't made up correctly, somebody burnt the water. But when we love one another, share with one another, we get to experience the love God has with us. And with that said, for married people, I got some homework for you. I don't think a pastor's ever done this before. Lord help me. Your homework is from the Bible. For those who have the app, you can read it. It's from 1 Corinthians chapter 7. Miss LaDonna, the last time I brought up Paul in this message about marriage, you called out, well, wasn't he single? What did he know about things, right? I'm so glad you're here. I was hoping to. That's right. Well, in a safe environment, one out of abuse and out of love, these are his words and homework for all the married couple. This is 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 3. Husband should fulfill his wife's sexual needs, and the wife should fulfill her husband's. The wife gives over her body to her husband, and the husband gives authority over his body to his wife. Do not deprive each other of these relations, unless both of you agree to refrain from sexual intimacy only for a limited time, so that you can give yourselves completely into prayer. But afterward, you should come together again, so that Satan won't tempt you because of your lack of self-control. You heard it from the pastor, so you can all husbands tell your wives, or wives tell your husbands. Pastor said it. Spend time together this week. That's what it means to be in a relationship. Does it mean all the emotional stuff will be there? Nope. All the spiritual stuff? Maybe not. But my encouragement is to spend time in that love. Husbands with their wives, wives to their husbands. And husbands, look what Paul said. It's your job first to make sure you serve your wife. For all of us who are single, for those who aren't married, how does this message reflect to us? It's a reminder of the need to share this love with others. And to be careful, how do we misuse it in our lives? The desires, the searching, but to allow others to experience love. And the easiest way to do this, I heard it yesterday. I'm going to try not to tear up right now. I had to use this lesson this morning. When somebody is hurting and suffering, the best thing to be with them, to have a relationship with them is just sit next to them. You don't need to have special words. You don't have to have any type of thing you need to do. It's just be next to them to experience that love. That's a gift that we have as single people to share that with others. But again, my encouragement for those who are married this week, be with your spouse. Take time to be with one another. Why? Because we have a world that's hurting and broken. And the ultimate relationship to fix it is relationship with Him. And we, as Southlake, can help others experience that. Both by your relationships and your marriages, people can see how you act and be with one another, but also just sitting next to somebody who's suffering, needing the love of God. And that is worth sharing. Amen. Thank you so much for taking time to experience a message here at Southlake. If you have time, make sure to subscribe right over here, but also check out other videos that are down right over here. Again, the Lord bless you this week, and thank you for checking out Southlake Church, where we
engage, grow, and